Hey guys, welcome back to the channel where I cover missing persons, unsolved cases, crime news, and more. So I'm trying to get a quick video done because I waited to the last minute. I worked today till 5, and then I work tomorrow again till 5, and then I gotta drive over to my parents' house, which is about 45 minutes-ish away because my parents are going to take me to the airport Nashville for CrimeCon, but I wanted to get at least a short quickie. I don't even know if it's going to end up being short because y'all know how I like to talk, and this case really does steam me. About justice for Corey Michelow. Now, I watched the entire trial today, and officially this was day 11 of the trial. I'm not going to play. There was a police officer up first. He testified for the defense. He actually was the arresting officer that actually arrested Christopher like a year later for the murder of Corey. And then the main witness that came up, which is what we've all been, I don't want to say waiting for, but yeah, I guess so, is Dr. Baden. Dr. Baden. So is it Dr. Baden, Dr. Biden? I don't know. I always say it probably the wrong way. It's B-A-D-E-N, so I'm thinking it's Baden. And of course, he is a renowned, now retired forensic psychologist. And in his time, he was an excellent, you know, in his line of work. Today, I gotta tell you, and the fact that he's testifying for the defense, and I know I'm going to get some flack from some of you guys who are all like, well, we got to give him a chance, you know, because Christopher deserves a fair trial. And yes, he absolutely does. And I will never not state that everyone in the United States, everyone deserves a fair and impartial trial. Okay. But I'm also not on the jury, and I have on my side because I want justice for Corey, and I believe what I believe, and I believe that Christopher abused his son, and that's what caused his ultimate death. So I'm going to kind of play just portions of his testimony. The direct, it was very, very, very long, and I even started to wonder if I could stay up, and I wondered if I needed some more caffeine in my day. Then they took a lunch break, and then the state did cross. So, like I said, I'm going to just kind of sift through the testimony here. And as always, if you would like to go back and watch Law and Crime Trials, full live stream of it, please do. I will post that in the information of the video. So without further delay, let's get to it.
We discussed autopsies while I was trying to qualify you as an expert. Once again, how many autopsies do you believe you've performed in your career?
More than 20,000.
More than 20,000. Have any of those autopsies been on children?
Yes.
About how many have been on children?
On children over the years, maybe close to 1,000, many hundreds.
Okay. Now, I contacted you to discuss the case of the death of Corey Michelow, did I not?
Yes.
Okay, and did you review materials that I sent you with an eye towards rendering an opinion as to the cause and manner of death of Corey Michelow?
Yes.
Okay. And did you prepare a report of your findings and opinions regarding Corey's death?
I did.
Now, did you perform the autopsy in this case?
No.
Although you did not perform the autopsy, were you able to develop an opinion as to the cause and manner of death?
Yes.
Do you know who did perform the autopsy in this case?
Dr. Ragasa.
Okay. Did you review the autopsy report prepared by Dr. Ragasa?
Absolutely, yes.
And do you know when that was prepared?
Yes, that autopsy was done 14 hours after the death of Corey.
Okay. Did you also review medical records from IV Pediatrics?
Yes.
Did you review medical records from Community Medical Health Hospital?
I did.
Did you review medical records from Jersey Shore Medical Center?
Yes.
Did you review medical records from Southern State Medical Center?
Yes.
Did you review what's called histological slides?
Yes.
And what are those?
Those are glass slides that most people come in contact with in school, where very thin slices of tissue are placed on and can be viewed under a microscope in order to increase the ability to see what's present. And that's commonly, those slides are commonly made in autopsy, after autopsies of the various tissues that are seen with the naked eye, because they give more information when seen under very much higher magnification.
Did you review the autopsy photos?
Yes.
Did you review any police documentation?
Yes.
Okay. Did you review a 33-second video that was taken on April 2nd, 2021?
Yes.
Okay. Did you review a photograph of Corey asleep in his father's arms on April 2nd, 2021 at approximately 2:02 in the afternoon?
Yes.
Did you review a Dr. Andrew report?
I did.
Did you review a Dr. Feingold's report?
Yes.
Did you review a video of a treadmill from a gym on March 20th of 2021?
Yes.
Did you review an additional video from the same gym taken on March 29th, 2021?
I did.
Okay. Now, do you have an opinion after you reviewed all the material in regard to Corey's cause of death?
I do.
Can you tell the jurors what that opinion is as to Corey's cause of death?
I think that Corey's cause of death has been confused because of extensive injuries caused by the CPR process. That I agree with a part of Dr. Ragasa's cause of death that indicates injuries to the heart and other organs, which I think is are typical vigorous CPR injuries.
CPR? When I heard this first, guys, I was like, WTF? What? I expected more out of him. So, yeah. Not buying it for a hot second, sir. And sadly, he's not very convincing, at least not to me. But you don't have to convince me, or he doesn't have to convince you. He's got to convince this jury.
I don't agree with that part, but I do agree with the inflammation and sepsis part of his diagnosis. The inflammation and sepsis part of the Dr. Ragasa's diagnosis refers to inflammation in the lung and the finding on culture of bacteria in the lung that could cause pneumonia and sepsis. So I think my cause of death is different than Dr. Ragasa's in recognizing, in my opinion, that the injuries are all CPR injuries. Nobody can live for more than 2 minutes with a 1.5 inch laceration of the heart, for example. And I do agree that the most likely cause of death is the lung inflammation, the bacterial capture of what the bacteria was, and his symptoms, the symptoms of shortness of breath, cyanosis, means a bluish color due to low oxygen, finding in the hospital that he had an 85% oxygen level, which is very low. All of us here would have about 97% or higher. The high white count, 29,000, mostly polymorphonuclear cells, which are the cells that respond to a bacterial infection. And then what I also base my opinion on is the CAT scan finding of pneumonia also present. So I think all together, the most likely cause of death was a very severe, rapid pneumonia. There are other causes that could also occur. Sudden, unexplained death in children syndrome occurs, like sudden infant death syndrome that causes baby deaths, and it's not clear what the cause of death is. Same thing with children 3, 4, 5, 6 years old can die suddenly, cause of death being the heart stops, and not knowing.
Sudden infant syndrome, death syndrome? No. I respect his many years of experience, but I couldn't disagree more with his opinion on this case. And again, yeah, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a forensic psychologist, whatever, pathologist. I'm not any of that stuff. But from what I've seen and what a lot of folks have seen, and we heard from other experts, and he's not an expert on children. So, and no. Again, that's just my opinion, and I know some folks may disagree. Totally fine.
The reason for that, and that's called sudden unexplained death in children syndrome, which occurs many hundreds of times a year in this country. And there may be other types of infectious diseases that sometimes don't get caught on autopsies, but they're all infectious diseases, some affecting the lungs, and I just feel that the injuries to the lung, liver, and mostly the heart are just typical vigorous, especially vigorous CPR, which is the very nature of what CPR does. It squeezes the heart 100 times a minute.
I'm going to get into that, Doctor. Did you form an opinion as to the manner of death?
Well, my opinion would be that the manner of death, for all the information we have, is natural.
Okay. Now, there are 5...
Yeah. A 6-year-old, perfectly healthy 6-year-old child died of natural causes. Yeah. No.
Manners of death, right?
Yes.
Okay. And natural is one of those 5?
Yes.
Okay. So you keep talking about CPR. Let's just get to the meat of it. What is CPR?
CPR refers to compression of the chest to force the heart to pump blood. As we sit here, most of us, our heart is pumping blood around 60, 70 times a minute. And that causes a squeezing of the whole heart. If the heart stops and CPR is the only way to get it started again, chest compression, which is severe enough to press on the heart to pump blood, is the only means of keeping the person alive. And that occurs because the sternum, the chest bone, has to be pushed down far enough to squeeze, to touch the heart, to go right up against the heart and squeeze it against the spine bones behind. So every compression during CPR physically squeezes the heart against the spine. And that will then push out the blood, which is essential because if it stops going out for 5 or 10 minutes, you wind up with a brain death, so that has to be done, and it's done vigorously, but it can also cause damage.
Now, can people die from CPR?
Well, not usually, because they're already dead. When the CPR can only be started after the heart stops. So once the heart stops, the person is dead, and then the alternative is, can we revive the heart to start beating again? And CPR sometimes starts the heart again after 5 or 10 minutes, but if it doesn't restart the heart, it becomes of no value afterwards. But it isn't that the CPR caused the death; it's just the fact that the heart does not restart beating that means the person is dead.
Now, doctor, there's been a lot made about an injury to Corey's heart through this trial. In the medical examiner's report, I believe it's described as a 1.5-inch laceration to the heart. Do you have an opinion as to how that 1.5-inch laceration to the heart occurred?
My opinion is that laceration occurred from continuous CPR compression of the heart between the sternum, the breastbone, and the spine that happens with sufficient compression of the heart. That the heart has no place to go between the sternum and the spine, the thoracic spine, so that injuries are common in the heart, and lacerations of the heart are not the most common, but can occur.
So now, if somebody was to sustain a 1.5-inch laceration to the heart, would that be something that could kill them?
Absolutely.
And how long would it take a person to die had they received a 1/2 laceration to the heart?
Well, the heart would stop beating within a minute or two. That is, the heart needs the electrical circuits in the heart to be functioning, and not only does a laceration cut through the muscle, but also through all the nerves in that area, and which would stop the electrical circuits in the heart.
So the laceration sustained in this case would have killed a person within minutes?
Yes.
Would it have been a bleed out or an electrical problem?
Well, not in a bleed out, because there doesn't have to be a breakage of if there's a breakage of the outer blood vessels, they're very small capillaries on the outside, you can get bleeding. So there would be a few blood vessels that are damaged on the outside of the heart. Those would bleed, but they bleed slowly, and if somebody dies within 2 or 3 minutes, it would bleed very little. If the person lived for a while, there'd be a slow leakage of blood, a slow beating of blood that would fill up the pericardial sac, the sac in which the heart is encased, so that if they were bleeding from the heart in any way, there'd be a lot of blood in the pericardial sac, whereas there wasn't here, and that's because the heart stopped beating right away. When the heart stopped beating, that's the end of blood coming into that sac.
Now, if that injury had occurred at 2:02 in the afternoon up until 3:43 in the afternoon, that's when Mr. Gregor arrived at the hospital with Corey, would he have been dead already?
He couldn't live more than 2 minutes with that kind of injury. Yes, absolutely.
Now, can a laceration to the heart caused by CPR be considered a blunt force injury?
Yes.
Did Corey die from CPR?
No. CPR didn't restore life in him, but he didn't die from it.
So the bottom line is Dr. Baden believes that Corey died from pneumonia, an infection, and that the injuries on his body are due to the attempts to save him through CPR. So that is his professional expert opinion. Okay? And now we're going to jump to cross-examination. And this, in my opinion, this was really, really good.
Continue now with the cross-examination.
Thank you.
Ms. Lento.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon, Ms. Lento.
So, Doctor, you're a forensic pathologist, correct?
Yes.
And you are not a board-certified pediatrician, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you are not a board-certified infectious pediatric disease doctor, correct?
Yes.
And you prepared a report in this matter, right?
Yes.
And you prepared this report on December 4th of 2023, correct?
Check. Yes.
Do you have a copy of your report?
I do,
Doctor?
right here.
If I may approach, I actually have a marked copy for purposes of the record. If I may
Certainly.
approach, I have what's been marked S-168.
Certainly.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Doctor, you would agree with me that the purpose of your report is to document your opinions and to document significant facts as to what you relied upon in formulating your expert opinion, correct?
That's included in my opinion, yes.
And you reviewed various materials in this case, right?
Yes.
And per your report, you reviewed the Ocean County Prosecutor's Office report, right?
Yes.
Did you review Detective Bromley's report from the prosecutor's office?
I don't recall whether I did or not.
Did you review the other 11 supplemental reports from the prosecutor's office relating to this case?
I have the report I relied upon. I don't remember the names of people.
My question was, Doctor, is besides the one report that you talk about in your report, did you review the other 11 supplemental reports relating to this case?
The report I looked at is rather thick. I don't know what's included in the distinctions you're making. I have it right here.
So besides the report that you reviewed, did you review any additional reports besides the one that you reviewed?
If they were not included in the report I looked at, I did not review them.
Okay, so you only reviewed the one report from the prosecutor's office, correct?
With multiple parts to it, but yes.
And she's just getting started. Apparently, the defense team did not provide Dr. Baden, or he didn't read them, Either way, there's a lot of information he is not aware of.
You didn't review any of the police reports from the Alcoa, Tennessee Police Department, correct?
From the which one?
The Alcoa, Tennessee Police Department?
I don't believe so.
Oh, and you didn't review the reports from the Ocean County Sheriff's Officer's Crime Scene Investigation Unit, right?
I believe that's true.
Okay. And as a forensic pathologist doctor and someone who has performed numerous autopsies, the facts surrounding a death or the attendant circumstances surrounding a death should be considered in determining the cause and manner of death, correct?
Yes.
And you have been published before, and you have said yourself that the manner of death is riddled with details, correct?
The manner of death is riddled. I don't think
Did
I
you
used
say
the
that,
term
Doctor?
riddled.
Riddled with details. Aren't those your words, doctor?
Not that I recall, but the manner of death includes many different types of information.
Okay. And in this particular case, doctor, are you aware that when Corey went to school on March 22nd, he had a bruise on his forehead and was sent to the school nurse?
I believe so. That sounds familiar.
And you did not consider that in your opinion or include that detail in your report, correct?
I didn't consider that it had any relationship to the cause of death.
And you also didn't put that fact within the report that you prepared, correct?
I may not have, right?
So, doctor, are you aware that Corey's first grade teacher saw him the next day on Tuesday the 23rd, and she saw a bruise and was concerned?
I don't recall that.
And are you aware that on Sunday, March 21st, Corey's grandparents, Carolyn and David Gregor, saw a bruise on Corey's forehead, and there was a family discussion about this bruise?
I remember there was a discussion in general about a bruise on his forehead, but I don't recall the details that you're referring to.
And you did not put that detail in your report, correct, doctor?
That's correct.
And are you aware that Corey's mother saw an imprint bruise and scrape on his chest when she was with Corey on March 23rd of 2021, where Corey was scared and upset, correct?
I remember there was a large bruise on his chest, yes.
And again, you didn't include that detail in your report, right, doctor?
That's part of the bruises I looked at, and that was a legitimate bruise and happened many days before he died.
Do you know that on March 25th of 2021, the defendant conducted a search on his phone as to will red marks turn into bruises?
No.
You weren't aware of that, doctor?
No.
And were you aware that on Friday, March 26th, Corey was kept out of school with an unverified absence?
I
You didn't
don't.
know that, doctor?
Probably not. I don't recall that.
Oh.
Probably not. What kind of, I don't know. I was just, my mouth just drops open at how Dr. Baden responds to this cross-examination by the state. It just shocks me about how much he does not know.
And are you aware that on Sunday, March 28th, Corey's mother observed a large bruise on his chest and fingerprint bruises?
And I'm sorry, and what?
Fingerprint bruises, as she described in her testimony?
I don't know what fingerprint bruises are, but I do recall the large bruise on his chest, yes.
Okay, and you didn't include that detail in your report, right, doctor?
That is, I had that to consider, and I didn't go over every bruise, but because I recognized them and I referred to them, but I didn't think they had anything to do with this cause of death.
Okay. And are you aware that on March 28th, officers from the Barnegat Township Police Department also saw this bruising on Corey?
Not specifically, but others had. I understand.
Are you aware that Corey's teacher saw bruises on Corey on Monday, March 29th, 2021, while Corey was attending virtual school on the computer?
I don't recall that.
Okay. Are you aware that Corey's teacher saw bruising on March 30th of 2021 while she was instructing Corey virtually on the computer?
I don't recall that.
Are you aware that Corey's teacher saw marks on Corey's face when she saw Corey virtually for school on March 31st of 2021?
I don't recall.
So, doctor, you didn't consider that Corey's teacher, the person who would be with him every single day, was concerned about bruising and saw this on Corey's body in formulating your opinion as to cause and or manner of death?
My opinion as to cause and manner of death were dependent on the findings at the time of death, and that whatever injuries and bruises which I looked at and which Dr. Regassa described did not cause or contribute to his death. It was my opinion after looking at the various bruises, and I agree with Dr. Regassa that it had nothing to do with his death.
Okay, so you reviewed medical records from IV Pediatrics,
Yes, at some point.
and you noted in your report that Corey's mother brought him first to IV Pediatrics, then to Community Medical Center, and then to Jersey Shore University Hospital, correct?
Yes,
And according to the medical reports, Dr. Deacon, Corey's pediatrician, examined Corey at approximately 5:15 on April 1st.
that sounds right.
And Corey told the doctor that he had bruises from playing football and when he fell, correct?
Yes,
And during this pediatrician's visit, Corey had no fever, correct?
there was no fever mentioned in the report.
And Corey's throat was not red, right?
That is my understanding, yes.
His lungs were noted to be clear, right?
Yes,
His lymph nodes were not enlarged, correct?
yes,
And his breathing was normal and quiet, correct?
I believe so at that time.
And he had full breaths, right?
I'm sorry, he had,
Corey had full breaths was the description, correct?
yes,
And Corey's lungs were noted to be clear, right?
yes,
And Corey's spleen was not enlarged, right?
that's correct.
And his liver was not enlarged, correct?
That's correct.
And the pediatrician noted 14 areas of bruising and or contusions located on Corey's body, right?
Yes,
The pediatrician then sent Corey and his mother to the hospital for blood work, right?
yes,
And Corey was examined by the pediatrician approximately 24 hours before he was pronounced, correct?
yes,
And that would have been less than 24 hours from when Corey was brought into Southern Ocean Medical Center in Stafford, right?
yes,
And Corey was examined at Community Medical Center, correct?
yes,
And that examination, there were no significant findings noted, correct?
as I recall, yes,
And you also reviewed medical records from Jersey Shore Hospital, right, doctor?
yes,
And Corey arrived at Jersey Shore Emergency Room at approximately 8:34 p.m., right?
yes,
And Corey arrived at the hospital with his mother, right?
yes,
And the chief complaint when Corey went to Jersey Shore was bruising, correct?
that's true, yeah, the evaluation of the bruising.
Right. And when Corey was being evaluated at the emergency room, he appeared scared and was afraid to answer the doctor's questions, correct?
I don't recall that specifically, but it sounds right.
Okay. And at Jersey Shore, a head-to-toe examination was conducted of Corey by the treating doctor, correct?
Yes,
And during the physical examination of Corey, Corey's lungs were noted to be clear.
yes,
Corey was not wheezing at Jersey Shore.
that's correct.
Corey was not in respiratory distress while at Jersey Shore.
That's correct.
No fast breathing was noted while Corey was at Jersey Shore.
That's correct.
And no hypoxia was noted while Corey was at Jersey Shore, right?
That's correct.
And there were approximately 12 different bruises or lacerations noted on Corey's body in various different stages of healing, documented by the doctor at Jersey Shore, right?
I don't recall the lacerations, but the bruises were enumerated, yes.
Did you review the medical records from Jersey Shore, doctor?
I believe so.
And if I showed you the medical records, would then you agree that there were also lacerations that were noted as well?
Were they noted? Does it say where they were noted?
Yes, they were, doctor. Did you review the body chart that the emergency room doctor basically drew into the chart records?
Yes, but I'm basing my opinions on what was seen at the time of the autopsy. There were no lacerations at the time of the autopsy, and many of the listed bruises weren't there. They weren't there to the naked eye, and they weren't there when they were examined under the microscope.
He doesn't want to consider anything that happened before he was seen at the hospital when Monster Dad took him in. And that's not considering all of the evidence, sir. That is just not considering all the evidence.
Doctor, and I respect that, but my question was about Jersey Shore, specifically as
Right.
of that night, and whether or not
Yeah,
there was lacerations noted in the chart.
Okay, I don't recall the mention of lacerations, but that could have well been stated.
Now, at approximately 10:49 on the evening of April 1st, blood work was collected from Corey so panels could be run while he was at Jersey Shore, correct?
Could you repeat that, please?
At approximately 10:49 on the evening of April 1st, blood was collected from Corey so panels could be run regarding his blood
Yes.
work. And so this would have been approximately 17 hours before Corey was admitted to Southern Ocean Hospital on April 2nd, correct?
Right.
And Corey's white blood cell count was within normal limits about 17 hours before he presented at the hospital the next day, correct?
Yes.
And at 11:01 p.m., a skeletal bone survey was conducted at Jersey Shore, right?
Yes.
And as part of the survey, a chest x-ray was performed, right?
Yes.
And the condition of Corey's lungs were noted to be clear, with no infiltration, with no significant findings, correct?
Yes.
And Corey was not admitted as a patient at Jersey Shore, right?
That's correct.
And Corey did not actually see the staff pediatric child abuse specialist while at Jersey Shore the evening of the 1st, right?
I don't recall that.
And were you aware, doctor, that that weekend was Easter weekend?
Yes.
Now, Corey was discharged from the hospital after 1 a.m. the morning of April 2nd, 2021, right?
Yes.
And Corey was examined 3 separate times while at Jersey Shore with no significant findings, right?
Right.
And Corey was at Jersey Shore Medical Center. He did not have a fever, correct?
That's correct.
And while Corey was at Jersey Shore Medical Center, he was negative for COVID, right?
Yes.
And he was also negative for the RSV virus, right?
Yes.
And he was also negative for the flu A, correct?
I believe so.
And he was also negative for the flu B, right?
Yes.
Now, on April 2nd, per your report, Corey was returned to his father about 9 a.m. that day, right?
Yes.
And are you aware that the defendant sent a text at approximately 9:05 a.m. to a female that he had met online named Marcy, stating that Corey was fine when he came home?
I don't recall that.
And are you aware that at 9:49 a.m. that morning, the defendant sent a text to Corey's mother stating that she was going to be in for a rude awakening, not indicating that Corey was sick at all?
I don't recall reading any text messages.
Are you aware that at 9:55 a.m., the defendant sent a message to a female named Amy confirming that Corey was okay when he was brought home that morning?
I didn't see any text messages.
So you didn't review the text messages in association of this case?
That's correct.
Okay. Doctor, are you aware that at 10:04 a.m. the defendant called the child abuse hotline regarding concerns for Corey, but didn't say that Corey was sick or that anything was wrong with Corey?
I don't recall. I don't recall.
Doctor, did you review the transcript or the copy of the phone call where the defendant called a screening officer at 10:04 a.m. the morning of April 2nd?
No.
Are you aware that during this phone call, doctor, that the screener asked the defendant if anybody had or is having a series of respiratory infections, coughs, sore throats, anything like that, and the defendant said no?
No.
You're not aware of that, doctor?
I'm not aware of it.
Do you know that at 2:13 p.m. on April 2nd, less than 3 hours before Corey passed, the defendant asked Marcy to talk on the phone?
The defendant asked who?
Asked Marcy, the girl who he had met online, to talk on the telephone.
No.
Are you aware at 3:22, about 25 minutes before Corey presented at the emergency room at SOS, the defendant sent a message to Marcy, "I'm so excited, ha ha."
No.
Okay. Do you know that at approximately 3:08 p.m. on April 2nd, the defendant conducted a search on his phone for lost consciousness, sleepy, and nauseous?
No.
And did you know, doctor, that the defendant deleted this search from his cellular phone?
No.
And were you aware that the defendant deleted his text messages between himself and Corey's mother for days around the time when Corey had passed?
No.
Are you aware that at approximately 3:30 on the 2nd, the defendant spoke to Corey's mom on the telephone and told her that he was bringing Corey to the hospital, but didn't tell her what hospital he was actually taking Corey to?
I don't recall that.
Doctor, did you review the surveillance videos from Southern Ocean Hospital?
Did I review the...
Surveillance videos from Southern Ocean Hospital?
No.
Okay, doctor, you didn't review multiple different surveillance videos from Southern Ocean Hospital where the defendant is seen taking Corey to the emergency room and taking him from the back seat of his car. You didn't see that video?
No.
Did you see the video when Corey presented at Southern Ocean Medical Center where you can see the condition that Corey was in when he actually presented to the hospital?
I don't believe so.
And did you see the video where the defendant is seen leaving the ambulance entrance of the hospital?
No.
She has him so... It's almost embarrassing for him. You could kind of play with the text messages, maybe, okay? But he's not checking this evidence of the cameras coming into the hospital, inside the hospital, and what have you. Again, there's a lot of evidence that it seems that Gallucci did not provide to Dr. Baden.
Now, you said, doctor, that you reviewed the medical records from Southern Ocean Medical Center, right?
Yes.
And Corey arrived at the hospital and he was taken into room 6 in the emergency room, right?
Yes.
And when Corey was taken into room 6, at that point, blood was drawn from Nurse Doyle about an hour before Corey was pronounced, approximately, correct?
I'm not sure of the timing, but sounds right.
Okay. And are you aware that when the defendant provided a case history as to what was going on with Corey, the defendant was described as clinical in his demeanor?
No.
Are you aware that while at the hospital, less than an hour before Corey's death, the defendant told medical staff not to contact Corey's mother?
No.
Corey was intubated at the hospital, right, doctor?
Yes.
Now, doctor, are you aware that the CPR that was performed on Corey has been described before the jury as pediatric CPR?
Sure.
And are you aware that the nurse who actually supervised the CPR had testified that one-hand CPR, pediatric CPR, was performed on Corey because he was 6 years old?
I don't remember the details, but sounds right.
Now, doctor, those details, that's not anywhere in your report, correct?
No.
Now, doctor, are you aware that the defendant was noted to be at Corey's bedside at approximately 4:51 p.m. while at Southern Ocean Hospital?
Say that again?
Are you aware from the medical records from SOCH that the defendant was noted to be at Corey's bedside at approximately 4:51 p.m. that day on the 2nd?
Not specifically, no.
Are you aware that Corey was pronounced at approximately 5:03 that day?
Yes.
And are you aware that the defendant left the hospital about 17 or 18 minutes after Corey was pronounced?
No.
Did you review the surveillance video from the hospital where you can see this?
No.
That we talked about before, where he's leaving the ambulance entrance of the hospital?
No.
Are you aware, doctor, that while the defendant was at the hospital at approximately 4:40, he called Marcy, this girl he had met online, about 2 times, and this would have been 23 minutes before Corey was pronounced?
No.
Are you aware that the defendant did not answer calls from Corey's mother at 5 p.m. and 5:04 p.m.?
No.
Are you aware that defendant's father told his son that he was going to call the police, and when the defendant's father got to the hospital, the defendant had left?
No.
Are you aware that the defendant searched, can your phone be tracked in airplane mode at 6:10 that day, and then searched, can my car be tracked at 6:10?
No.
Are you aware that the defendant then put his phone in airplane mode at approximately 6:31 p.m.?
No.
Are you aware that the defendant didn't put his phone back on until approximately 2:19 the following day?
No.
Are you aware that when the defendant put his phone back on, he was in Arkansas by the Texas border?
No.
Are you aware that the defendant spoke to his father in a 25-minute phone call where his father told him to come back, and only then did he turn around and start heading east, doctor?
No.
Now, doctor, you talked about in your direct testimony this post-mortem CT scan, correct?
Post-mortem is, I'm sorry?
You talked about in your direct examination this post-mortem CT scan which was performed, correct?
That the post-mortem CT scan was a what?
Was performed on Corey, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And this scan was actually ordered by Dr. Larkin, right?
Yes.
And Dr. Larkin is not a medical examiner, but he is an investigator with the Ocean County Medical Examiner's Office, correct?
He's a physician investigator, yes.
Right. And he's not a forensic pathologist, correct?
No, he's a family practice doctor.
Right. And the post-mortem CT scan of Corey's lungs was taken about 3 hours after Corey passed, correct?
That sounds right.
And the scan was interpreted by a clinical radiologist who was working at the hospital, correct, doctor?
It was interpreted by a radiologist. I don't know the exact title, but it was interpreted by a radiologist who interprets CAT scans.
Right, and the scan was not interpreted by a forensic pathologist, right, doctor?
That's correct.
And it was not interpreted by a pediatric infectious disease doctor, correct?
That's correct.
Now, this lung swab that you were talking about before, this actually occurred during Corey's autopsy on April 3rd, correct?
Yes.
And the autopsy started at approximately 9 a.m., right?
Yes.
And this would have been the following day after Corey passed, right?
Yes.
And this lung swab, where the staff was noted, you are relying on to formulate your opinion, that was taken after Corey died, right?
Yes. I'm including that in my opinion as one of a number of things I'm relying upon, yes.
So while Corey was actually at the hospital, nurses touched his body, correct?
Yes.
And the doctor touched his body, right?
Which doctor?
The doctor who would have been at SOCH, let's say Dr. Pachotti touched his body, correct, doctor?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And Corey's body was actually transferred by a funeral home to Community Medical Center where the autopsy was performed, right?
That's my understanding.
And now, doctor, while Corey was alive at the hospital in SOCH, blood was drawn, as we said before, about an hour before he died, correct?
Yes.
And there was a blood culture done regarding his blood, which was taken while he was alive at the hospital, right?
Yes.
And the blood culture came back that there was no bacteria found in Corey's blood while he was alive, correct?
That's correct.
And you don't mention that there was a negative blood culture for bacteria in your report at all, correct?
I'll have to review it, but if you say so, I agree with that.
It's almost as if he realizes this is a losing battle for him. And I wonder if he's highly disappointed in Gallucci and his team for the lack of information provided to him to review.
You also indicate in your report that Corey was talking when he was at the hospital at SOCH, correct?
I believe so.
And are you aware that the nurse who treated Corey, who was actually there, said that Corey mumbled and then began to seize?
Was that before or after the intubation?
That would have been before the intubation. Are you aware that when Corey was at the hospital, the nurse who treated him described him not as talking, but mumbling, and then he began to seize?
That sounds right.
Now, doctor, you are being paid for your testimony in this case today and for your review of the materials, correct?
I'm paid for the time I spend, yes.
And before, during your direct examination, you testified about polycells, correct?
Yes.
And again, doctor, nothing about these polycells is listed in your report whatsoever, correct?
May not be. I say there's a high white blood count someplace, I believe. I'm sure of that.
But doctor, I believe your testimony was polycells specifically in regard to inflammation, correct?
Well, the high white blood count is consisting of the polymorphonuclear cells.
Right, so my question is, though, regarding that, that's not specifically listed in your report.
I may have just included the white blood count being very high.
Now, doctor, before you came to court today, you watched Dr. Andrews' testimony, correct?
No, I think I received a transcript. I read it.
Okay, so you reviewed a transcript of Dr. Andrews' testimony
Yes.
before you came to court today.
Yes, that's
And you also reviewed a transcript of the infectious disease doctor's
Dr.
transcript as
Feingold.
well.
Yes.
Okay. Now, doctor, you reviewed Dr. Vergas's post-mortem examination report, correct?
Okay, you see, I'm agreeing with you too much. I have a sentence here, 29,000 white blood cells with an increase in polymorphonuclear cells, an indicator of infection. I do mention that.
Okay. I was talking about the inflammation part, but that's okay, doctor. So again, you reviewed the post-mortem examination report authored by the Ocean County Medical Examiner's Office, correct?
Yes.
And the autopsy was performed by Dr. Vergasa, as we said, on April 3rd of 2021, right?
Yes.
And in this report, Dr. Vergasa concluded that there were multiple contusions with different stages of duration, correct?
Yes.
And he also concluded that there was an epicardial contusion with myocardial laceration with acute inflammatory reaction, correct?
Yes.
And Dr. Vergasa had initially found that the manner of death was not determined, correct?
That's correct.
And then on August 18th of 2022, the manner of death was then changed to homicide, correct?
Yes, 14 months later, yes.
Right. And you also reviewed Dr. Andrews' report before you came to court today, right?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know when Dr. Andrews' report was prepared?
I don't. He had two reports, as I understand. One of them that I have here is February 25th, 2022. And there was another one that I don't have right here.
And actually, doctor, there was actually 3 reports prepared by Dr. Andrew in regard to this matter. Is that correct?
I don't recall. I just recall 2 reports.
You only reviewed 2 of the 3 reports, doctor?
I think so.
Okay. Doctor, nowhere in your report do you indicate that Corey's lungs had pus, correct?
That's correct.
And nowhere in your report do you indicate that Corey's lungs had an abscess, correct?
That's correct.
So, doctor, just so I understand, you have concluded that Corey had pneumonia and sepsis, and you based this upon a post-mortem CT scan interpreted by a clinical radiologist, a lung culture taken the day after Corey died, while a blood culture existed showing that there was no bacteria in Corey's blood, correct?
And what I saw under microscopic slides. And the blood culture has little significance.
A blood
because
culture has little
95% of the time they turn up negative, even in full-blown pneumonia.
Okay, doctor, it's also your opinion that Corey died from non-symptomatic hyperspeed pneumonia while he was also presenting with bruising, correct? Symptomatic hyperspeed pneumonia while he was also presenting with bruising, correct?
That's my best opinion based on the information available. That's right, that the bruising had nothing to do with the death,
right,
and that he had symptoms of bronchopneumonia, and X-ray and autopsy findings of that, but that it's not my definite conclusion. It's that that's the most 55-60%. It's more likely than not the most likely cause of his death, even though there are other natural conditions that could also have been missed at autopsy.
So, doctor, you're not with absolute certainty that that's the way that Corey died?
Well, I'm absolute 100%.
You're not absolutely
Objection,
certain
Judge.
that's the way?
He's answering the question.
Well, I thought he answered it with a request for clarification. So go ahead, Ms. Linton.
Thank you. So you're not absolutely certain that that's how Corey died, because as you just said, there could have been other possibilities, correct?
You're confusing what I'm saying. I'm absolutely certain that he didn't die of cardiac trauma, as was Dr. Regasso when he did the autopsy. Put down after the heart disease question CPR right on the first day that he looked at those injuries. So I'm certain and from the fact that you can't live more than a couple of minutes with that kind of injury, I'm certain he didn't die of heart and liver and lung injury. I think the most likely cause of death is some kind of pneumonia that developed that evening after he went to a number of hospitals where he could have picked up that bacteria. But that's the most likely, but I'm not saying it's definite.
Okay, doctor, I appreciate that. And you also said during your direct examination that Corey could have died from sudden, unexpected 6-year-old death syndrome?
Yes, sudden, unexpected, sudden, unexplained death in childhood, which is a cause of death that is listed hundreds of times every year in children who die like Corey, where the cause of death isn't certain.
Okay, so the cause of death is not certain, and are you aware, doctor, that Corey was almost 7 years old when he passed?
Yes, I am.
Thank you, doctor. No further questions.
Boom. That was longer. I was going to try to cut it, but I just couldn't do it. The prosecutor's office, they did an excellent job on their cross-examination. And again, I think that they really called into question Dr. Baden's opinions. And I really believe that does not make the defense's theory of sepsis because of pneumonia a real possibility. Again, we'll have to see what the jury believes and thinks, because it's up to them. But I think we came out pretty good as far as in the justice for Corey camp today. And they closed out with Christopher, of course. He decided not to testify. I personally didn't think he would testify, but it would have been really interesting if he decided to take the stand. But yeah. Alright guys, so that's all I've got for this one. I will not have another video up on this probably until next week. If we get a verdict while I'm at CrimeCon, I will definitely post an update on that, if nothing else, in the community tab. And with that said, I hope you guys have a great rest of the day, and most of all, stay safe.